It does say preparing live stream.
I guess it's waiting on okays for the live stream from all of us. So I
Here, it
need
should be
to
starting
click
now.
the okay.
Really?
It's starting now.
Yes, I just clicked the okay on live stream.
Okay, we got Adam's
Yeah.
approval, so I think we're good.
We're on.
Let me just see what else we have to do here. One second, let me just set this up. Hi, everybody. We're gonna be with you in a second. All right, that is set up. One more thing I have to do. So we have a come on, behave yourself. All right. That's good. That's good. That's good. Let's do this. Start. Tell me if you can hear the music.
The radical, fundamental principles
Yes.
of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday, August 1st. Everybody. Streaming from my Airbnb in Lisbon, Portugal. So I apologize for the delay. Oh, this isn't, none of this is working. Okay. Let's see. Interesting. I wonder what this was going to do. Can one of you say something?
Hello.
Okay.
Hello, it's nice to be on the air.
Give me a second, 1 second.
Okay, who was that other voice?
Sorry, I clicked the wrong thing. It was a Facebook story.
In Spanish?
I don't know what it was. Some kind of
Talk.
music.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, that's good. What did we say? Let me just see what the settings are again. We've got, okay, 1 second. Okay, so output is right now. Input is on. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right, I think we're ready. Welcome everybody to our AMA. Off to a rocky start with all my technical issues. I think they're resolved, but I'm not 100% sure. So I guess we'll see. And today we have a lot of people attending via Zoom. So thank you all for joining me. So I'm in Portugal. I'll be here for the next 10 days. So I'll be doing shows from here tomorrow. We will have the Nikos, our Nikos show. So stay tuned for that. Let me see, where's, I can see the chat. I assume you guys who are not on the Zoom can hear and you can hear everybody. So, so we'll be in for the next 10 days. Tomorrow, Nikos will be, I think, same time as today. We'll have the Nikos show, and then next week we should have programs We won't have a program on Monday and Tuesday, but then Wednesday, and the rest of the week, we should have programs. On Monday, I'm flying to Norway to do give a talk in Norway, so I'll be gone at reasonable hours East Coast time, and then we'll be here, and then from here I travel to Spain, and in Spain I rented an office. I'll be there for a month, and we'll have an office in Barcelona, so we'll be able to do the shows from there. And hopefully by then I will have figured out this new setup that I've got, which should allow me to do everything I do from home from here. But it's been a little bumpy as of today. All right. Let's start with our panel. So let's start with Jennifer. Jennifer?
You ready? Yeah. Anarchists, do you think anarchists are anarchists because they, in theory, think maybe having a government is a good idea if they stayed doing their proper job, but they always get corrupted and they always end up growing and messing it up. So because it doesn't work in practice, that you have to end up having force into the market, and it can't be a monopoly, and the government can't have a monopoly, or because they just think it's not a good idea to begin with.
I mean, I think the two are related, right? So I think they think it's not a good idea to begin with. And partially why they think it's not a good idea to begin with is because they view government monopoly as inherently it's going to break down. So it can be sustained. There's no principle to sustain it. And the only way anything works in the real world, the only way anything works well in the real world is competition. And therefore, if the government is going to work well, the rationale is you need competition for the government. So retaliatory force going to work well, you need competition in retaliatory force. And that's the only way they can conceive of it working.
So they basically don't understand the nature of force. That's basically what it is.
They don't understand a lot of things. They don't understand the nature of force. Yes. And as a consequence, they don't understand the market is the place that doesn't have force. But more importantly is they don't understand the nature of objectivity. So they don't understand the nature of objective law and objective procedures in law. And they don't understand how that, the objectivity breaks down once you introduce, competing law enforcement agencies. There cannot be objectivity under a situation like that.
Thank you.
So one of the reasons we think a government monopoly can work is because we believe in objective law, and we, based on individual rights, and that objective law can exist and should exist, and it's important that it exists. And they don't get that whole conception. So for them, all the rules of engagement, think of all the laws you have today on what evidence you can bring to court and what evidence you can't, all in an effort to try to make the proceedings objective. And they think that somehow can be achieved through competition. Or think about how a policeman behaves, right? Not ICE, that don't behave this way, but how a policeman behaves, right? They have to read you your rights. They can't do certain things to you. There's a whole process, right? And that doesn't exist if there's competition. My process can be different than your process. There's no arbiter. There's no mechanism by which to adjudicate if I misbehave. The market takes care of it. Competition takes care of it. People leave my agency because they don't like the way I read them their rights. But if there is such a thing as rights. So it's those two issues: the nature of force and objectivity.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. Michael.
Hi, Yaron.
Hey.
Nice to chat with you. I've been a viewer for many years and actually introduced my cousin to your show, and we've
Oh,
really
cool.
enjoyed following the Iran war coverage. And as a birthday gift, he actually sponsored my Patreon membership, so I could join and participate in this
Oh,
Ask Me
nice.
Anything conversation. So
Nice. So welcome,
um,
Michael. Yep.
thank you. I wanted to ask a little bit about Venezuela. When you spoke about Maduro being captured, you mentioned that well in the past, the US should have gone to war when the oil industry was nationalized. And I don't know if I agree with that 100% because, of course, we do need to defend property rights, but where do you draw the line between a US company or if an individual citizen had a house in Venezuela and that was attacked or their rights were violated by the government there? Where's that dividing line?
Yeah, I mean it's tricky, right? It has to be. So the two issues. One is it has to be a violation of property rights, and then it has to be a vital national interest. It has to be something that is crucially important to the United States, to our economy, to the livelihood of people in the United States. And energy is clearly something that is vitally important. And of course, Venezuela is not the example, the real example that I know Leonard has spoken about, and I think Ayn Rand mentioned, is the nationalization of the oil in the Middle East, which, and that was before we had oil in the US. So at some point you can say, you know, we don't really need it. We don't really need the oil because there's plenty of oil in the world. It's not that big of a deal. And the burden of risk is on you, the company, right? If they nationalize it, tough, which is true for most things when you're dealing overseas, right? You're under somebody else's law, do the research. But particularly in the Middle East in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, when there was very little oil in the US, or at least we didn't think there was a lot. And the bulk of oil was coming from there globally. It was essential to the preservation of life in America. And think about how the Arabs used it in 1973 and then 1979 when they had an oil embargo in the United States. So they used the fact that they nationalized oil against Americans. So it's a combination of property rights. So there has to be a real violation, and real national interest, real national security interest. So, and of course, that's always abused. So it's right to be skeptical of arguments like that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Daniel. You're muted. Yeah. I can't hear you, but this time it's justified. Okay.
Just me this time. I'm wondering, I know it's a little early to talk about post-Trump, but when he is gone, will the next president likely say, if Trump can get away with that, just wait till you see what I can get away with? Or are they more likely to go back and say, no, let's be a little more constitutional about this? And if it's the former, what can we do? What can we start thinking about to prevent that from getting the right person in, to get the right person into office, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, government almost never gives back power, right? Once it's attained. So you might get a president who says, I'm not going to expand on what Trump did, but it's very unlikely that they say, I'm going to do less than what Trump did. And then the next one, but there's no guarantee of the one following that and the one following that. So once you set a new bar, what happens? So the same with, once they know that they can do stuff, they continue to do it. And then when the next crisis happens or the next really bad president happens, then you get them pushing the envelope. What do we do about it? God, I mean, you would hope the courts are doing some about it. Hopefully, in the next 2 years, they'll continue to do it and they'll do more. But they haven't. They've been far from consistent with regard to that. But what we need to do about it is talk more about the role and the importance of the Constitution, why the Constitution is the way it is, why we have separation of powers, why we don't have kind of a runaway executive, why it's so difficult to pass laws, what's the role of the courts. We really need to better conceptualize all of that and better
Trump
educate.
is the poster child of this, of what why you want a constitution, right? Not that it's protecting us right now, but
Yeah.
he's the
Yeah.
whole reason.
Well, it's protecting us somewhat, right? So he couldn't get away with getting rid of birthright citizenship. He didn't get away with the tariffs, although he's trying other tariffs. And I think there's a chance the Supreme Court will overrule these ones as well. And then he'll go to the next, who knows what he'll do. There's a few other things that the courts have knocked down that he tried. Biden tried student loan forgiveness out of nowhere, no legislation out of nowhere. And the court said no. So the courts do their function. It takes time, and they don't do it consistently, and they don't always do it, but they do it. But what we need to teach people is the role of the Constitution, why we need presidents who respect the Constitution. And really what you really need now is to resurrect the Senate and the House. Like the Senate and the House have become irrelevant. They don't pass laws. They don't challenge the president. They're completely partisan. What we need is much more bipartisan and much more a Congress that is willing to do stuff. Like, for example, Congress could right now withdraw whatever tariff authority they had given the president in the past. They could just do that. Or they could vote that the Iran war is unconstitutional because he didn't go to Congress to ask permission. Although, they could do stuff. And we need to vote in senators and congressmen who are willing to challenge their own political party and who are willing to challenge the president and who respect the Constitution. Just that. Other than that, everything's fine. Thanks, Daniel. Adam.
With respect to Congress respecting the Constitution, the Senate has the authority and the duty to examine all our foreign treaties and ratify those that it approves of. However, the Senate never took up the Budapest Memorandum or made it the law in the United States. It never ratified it. And this gave Trump a lot of room to side with Russia in the war on Ukraine. Will you comment on that?
Yeah, let me just get this all set up. No, that's still. Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, the reality is that Congress doesn't do its job, and it doesn't do its job with foreign policy. And we gave Ukraine certain guarantees, and because they're not,
ratified by the Senate.
Yeah, they're not ratified in the Senate. They're not. I was going to say law, but that's not law. They're not an official treaty, right? Because they weren't ratified, they haven't become an official treaty of the United States. The president can basically ignore it, and has way too much. We know he's way too friendly to Russia, and although there's some reason to believe that that's changing a little bit. I mean, it does look like Trump has shifted a little bit towards Zelensky, or at least is not putting as much pressure on Ukraine as he was a year ago or 6 months ago. So it seems to be he seems to be a little fed up with Putin. So whatever it is, but yes, I think the Senate needs to take on the foreign policy responsibility that it has, and it has according to our Constitution, and it does not do it, right? And I think that allows presidents to basically run foreign policy with no checks and balance. Now, the president has a lot of authority when it comes to foreign policy, according to the Constitution, but not as much as if Congress is just silent on foreign policy. Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Colby.
Hello.
Hey.
All right, Yaron. I got a big one for you.
Okay.
All
I'm
right.
ready.
So I don't remember where I heard it from you, but it was one of your videos sometime a while ago. You were talking about how you were talking to the Bahamas or something like that about buying an island and like making some sort of country or something like that.
Yep.
So why don't we just make a town? Make a town and get rid of property taxes and I don't know, make a dent in something.
Well, what would a town do? I mean, like you'd still be under federal law, you'd still be under state law, you'd still pay all those taxes. A town, it's small. I don't know how many people want to live in a small town. Job opportunities are limited. You can pay no property taxes. I mean, Florida is now doing away with property taxes. Of all the offensive things out there, yeah, property tax is one of them, but it's relatively small. I guess you could have no public schools. I don't know if the state would allow that. Would the state allow, I think, because that's state law. So you could have a public school ban on everything. I just think the benefits are marginal and the costs are high. There's a huge advantage in living in a city, even if you have to pay property taxes.
I should add that in California, the private cities do not have government schools on premises. And they generally assume that the parents will provide for their children's schooling.
Yeah, but the kids are eligible to go to private schools outside of the private city.
Right.
So the parents still send their kids to public schools just outside of the city limits. So, I mean, the neighborhood I was living in Orange County was privately incorporated, so it wasn't part of any other city, but there was a public school close by. So you could create something like that. I just don't see the huge upsides. And then how do you prevent people from moving there who don't agree with our ideas and ultimately change the governance to a system that we don't like? It's just there's just a lot of work to be done still.
I just feel like if like the biggest thing about it would be to make the example, the model for other people. Because like I know you're going around and talking to people and you're telling them about it, but most people are like, they want to see it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't buy that because, everybody's seen what socialism does and they still want more socialism. Everybody's seen how well capitalism worked in America in the late 19th century and in Hong Kong in the 20th century, and they still hate capitalism. I just don't buy that what's missing is an example. And I'm not sure the example can work at a city level so as to be a meaningful difference from others at a town level, to be meaningfully different than other towns to serve as that example. Like maybe a country, but even a country, people don't hate capitalism because they don't think it'll work. It's the point I've been making for 20 years is people don't resent capitalism because they don't think it'll work. They resent capitalism because they think it's immoral. And having another example of it is not going to convince them otherwise, I think. Thanks, Kobe. All right, Zach.
Hey, good afternoon, Dr. Brook. I recently listened to The Real Lincoln. I think you've mentioned it before and didn't have a very high opinion of it, and I'm a little skeptical. But it got me thinking. The author seems to portray Lincoln as just a warmonger, just trying to grab power. So that got me thinking, what were, if any, attempts to maybe uh, use diplomacy or financial incentives to avoid war. The author really didn't cover any of that, but it got me curious. Were any attempts made like that prior to the Civil War? Did Lincoln do anything like that? Do you have any insights into that?
Well, I don't think Lincoln did anything. And remember, the Civil War started by the South. The South fired the first shot. So it wasn't like Lincoln actually initiated the war and went all in to liberate slaves. But there were lots of attempts in the early 19th century, all the way up to the 1860s, to try to convince the South to abandon slavery. And there was an entire abolition movement dedicated to that. And then there were all these new states being added to the Union, and there were debates about whether they could have slavery or couldn't have slavery. So certainly persuasion was being used in order to try to do away with slavery. And there was discussion, I think, of compensation for the slave owners in such a scenario. No, the South wasn't interested. And if you read what the South has to say, the South was willing and indeed happy to go to war in order to preserve slavery.
Great, I appreciate it.
Sure. And yeah, there are libertarians out there who think slavery would have gone away anyway because it wasn't economic. And maybe that's true 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. But you can't justify the 20, 30, 40, 50 years of slavery. It should have never been allowed from day one. The founders should have found a way to get it, to abolish it or to phase it out. And it was inevitable that ultimately it would lead to a war because it was a clear violation of the Declaration and the spirit of the Constitution.
I definitely agree. Appreciate it.
Sure. Hey, Catherine.
Hi, is it okay if I stay off camera?
Sure.
Okay, I have two questions, but you can maybe just answer one this time. So, two things. One, I'm trying to figure out where I want to live, like long term. Like, where are some of your favorite places? Like, if you didn't live where you lived, like in the US, like I've lived in New York for all of my 20s, and then my job right now is San Francisco based, but my team is very global. And so I think with this new remote work, people are able to live all over. And I like London, but I really like the US. And then my other question is kind of related, is like, we're planning a bunch of travel, and I know you've traveled a lot. Where are some of your favorite places that you've traveled?
All right, so let's leave the second question to round two. So places I like in the United States to live, I mean, California is a great place to live. You have to suffer the taxes, but
because I'm being taxed there already.
You're being taxed there already. So if you're already being taxed there, and you're not going to pay higher taxes by moving to California, then California is a great place to live. Northern California is beautiful, but Southern California, the weather's even better. I lived in Orange County. San Diego is an amazing city. I don't like Los Angeles or the Los Angeles area, but I'd say San Diego, Orange County, and then the Bay Area. There's just some beautiful places in the Bay Area to live, both on the west and even on the East Bay. There's some nice places. So those are my two. So California is one. The second is Austin, Texas. I mean, Austin is a great city. Weather is a little bit is challenging. It's the summers are brutal. They're very hot and humid. But other than that, it's just a great city. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of culture, and university town. Housing is cheap, rent is cheap relative to California, relative to New York, so you can upgrade your standard of living based on that. And what else? Yeah, so I'd say Austin. Those are my favorite places. I mean, there are a lot of nice places. Charlotte is nice. There are places in Atlanta that are nice. Phoenix, if you can tolerate the really, really, really hot summers and very dry weather.
What about London?
Well, London's great, but you said in the United States. I mean,
Yeah,
London's super expensive, but if that's not an issue, then yeah, and the weather sucks, of course. It's London weather, but it's culture, you can't beat it, right? So it's a little similar to New York, probably more culture even than New York. Great restaurants. But yeah, you could go a place like that for like 3 months, go
Yeah.
get an Airbnb and test it out and see if you like living there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Houston's really nice.
I don't really like Texas as a state.
Yeah, Houston.
Personally, they don't really support women's rights very much.
Houston, yeah, they don't treat women. Yeah, Texas has a problem with abortion in particular, and to disagree with Coleman, Houston's nice, but it's flat. It's if the weather in Austin is bad, then it's a little bit worse in Houston. More hot, more humid. All right, Andrew.
Hey, Yaron.
Hey.
You had a segment on your show where you reacted to David Sachs' comments about Israel, and he was just so severely exaggerating like the damage that Israel was incurring in fighting Iran. And it was interesting in a couple of aspects to me. Like, one, I was thinking, what would motivate him to do this? Because it's so kind of easily it's easily disproven what he's saying, and it's such a severe exaggeration. It's like when somebody does that, the only thing I could come up with was he's afraid of something, because it just seems to come from a place of fear when you lie like that. But I was wondering, like, if you agree with that, like, what do you think he's afraid of, or what would be motivating him in misrepresenting the situation so badly?
Well, I mean, I don't know what psychology motivates him, but look, he assumes his audience has no clue. He assumes the audience isn't going to check, and he's probably right. Because he lies about other stuff, and liars just. I mean, why does Trump lie? I mean, Trump lies on things that it even easier to directly check and examine. He lies about what he said yesterday, so you can just rewind the video and or what he said 10 minutes ago. So why do liar lie? To manipulate people, to rationalize their own belief system. So they believe Iran is good, Israel bad, or they believe Iran strong, Israel weak, and they'll just keep lying to present a front that suggests that what they've said in the past is true. So he's afraid of being wrong, I guess. He's afraid that everything he believes in and all his studying and all his work and all his writing and all the interviews he's ever done over the last 20 years, he's afraid all of that is wrong.
Is he afraid of World War III? That whole kind of.
No, I don't think he's afraid of World War III. I don't think he takes World War III seriously. And Israel's not going to cause World War III, so. No,
But he
I
was
mean,
saying
he wants to believe his worldview is, and he wants to hold on to this worldview, that Iran are the good guys, Israel and America are the bad guys. Iran are strong and powerful, Israel is weak, and he's willing to lie, maybe to himself, but certainly to other people, in order to tell that story. And, you say it's easy to verify, but there's a million conspiracy theories out there that are easy to verify that are wrong, and people still hold on to them.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, the other aspect of it, I guess, that interests me was like how indignant you got about it, because, that was like, you really, had some firepower against him in that segment. And like, I guess that just speaks for itself, that you just think it's contemptible to lie like that and to misrepresent the situation.
Well, and it's so stupid because anybody with a brain will check. A lot of people have, relatives or friends, and so it's not that difficult to check. It's just so stupid to be that stupid. So, yeah. So that is I think why. Why I got so. Plus, this was at the height of it. It was just, yeah. I mean, it was so stupid.
Got it.
All right. Let's see. We have a bunch of super chats. So let's do some of those, and then we'll go into round two. All right. Harper Campbell has a $100 question. Thank you, Harper. The Commerce Department announced 7 new equity stakes in private companies. How is the market doing so well, given Trump owning shares of major companies? Is he deregulating as he is socializing? The deregulation is doing some more good than the socializing is doing harm. Well, but look, I mean, what is the stock market measuring? What is the good and bad that the stock market measuring? For example, the government took a 10% stake in Intel, and Intel stock is way up since then. Does that mean the stock market says, oh, government ownership is good? Government ownership? No, it says for Intel, over the foreseeable future, government ownership reduces the probability of bankruptcy to 0 and increases the chances that the government will send business in Intel's direction. And there's a really good chance that Intel will become more profitable because the government owns 10%. So Intel stock is up because the stock market is not making philosophical statements. It's not making long-term statement about the benefits of capitalism or the risks that exist to capitalism. It is asking a question to this particular company: is the government's ownership of stock good or bad? And over the next foreseeable horizon, let's say 5 years. And the answer for most of these companies is good. They're going to get more business. Now, other companies, it might be bad. The competitors who don't, where the government is not taking an equity stake. And you could argue, yeah, but overall, this is the demise of capitalism, and this is going to hurt companies over the long run. Okay, but when, how much, how does it affect cash flows? Maybe the companies that are really hurt by this are private and not public companies. Maybe public companies, the government takes a 10% stake in all public companies. Maybe they benefit somehow from it in a short, again, in the cash flow segment. And so it's not like the stock market is saying, the stock market is saying that on a relative basis, the government taking a 10% stake has very little or no impact on the companies in the stock market's ability to make money over the foreseeable future. And I think that's right. Over the next 5 years, this is not going to be that big of a deal. And if it is a big deal, we don't even know how to price it. We wouldn't know what to do with it. And at the same time, we're deregulating. And look, the economy is doing okay. It's not doing great. Most of the harm in the economy is being incurred by small to medium-sized businesses. The bigger businesses that happen to be public are doing fine, and some are doing really well. And there's a huge boom in everything to do with AI data centers, which drives a big chunk of economic activity. When that all gets built up, hard to tell what happens then. And there's some deregulation going on. Imagine if Trump didn't do all the screwy things that he was doing. The economy would be chugging along right now at 3%, maybe more, maybe 4%, right? Without tariffs, with winning a war, and with winning the war, and all the other nonsense, and without taking equity stakes, the economy could be going at 3-4%. The underlying, there's some really good stuff. There's innovation going on. There's startups. The entrepreneurs are working. And the fact that Trump is taking equity stakes is not stopping any of that. Thanks, Harper. Let's see. Colleen. How stupid would Fauci have been if he hadn't taken, how stupid would Fauci have been if he hadn't taken the fifth? Yeah, I mean, he has to take the fifth, right? I mean, he's being given a pardon by Biden, but he doesn't need to risk it. Why would he risk it not taking the fifth? And you know, they're just gonna, you know, he's being scapegoated. Now, I think he did some really stupid things. I think the power went to his head. I think he misbehaved. I think a lot of things, but the fifth exists. Why not take it, right? He's got nothing to gain, and he's got nothing to gain and a lot to lose. By taking the fifth, all that'll do is the people who hate him continue to hate him. By answering the questions, he could have got himself into legal trouble. He could have affected all kinds of other people. He could have affected all kinds of other issues. There was no advantage for him to answer the questions in front of a Congress that is not inclined to actually listen to the answers. Liam, are there some Asian countries that have no welfare systems? Some of these Chinese systems look more advanced than American systems. Maybe China is where free market revolution will happen. Yeah, I mean, there's no welfare in China. I mean, China is a nominally communist country. There's no redistribution of wealth, a very little redistribution of wealth. Even healthcare, if you can't pay for an operation, you don't get the operation. You die. Right? So you either have insurance or you pay cash, but there's no socialized medicine, and there's very little redistribution of wealth in terms of welfare state in China. Now, the cities in China are amazing. They're beautiful. They're more advanced than American cities. Their architecture, the infrastructure, the high-speed trains, the train stations, everything is amazing. But there is, but will there be a free market revolution? I mean, this is the problem, is that if you get rid of the authoritarians, if you get rid of the dictators in China, and you actually allow people to vote, they'll probably vote in the welfare state, right? So if you move towards more political freedom, China will become more like the West, and therefore less free market. So no, I mean, there's no there's no possibility, I don't think, in the short run that China becomes the laissez-faire capitalist, or Asia becomes laissez-faire capitalist. Again, laissez-faire capitalism will not happen unless we have an intellectual revolution. This goes back to Colby's question. No example matters. It's not like the example of Hong Kong moved anybody. So you want to change the world, you have to change this philosophy. This is why it's so frigging hard. This is why it takes so long. This is why we probably won't happen in my lifetime. And so, no, I don't think it's going to happen somewhere. Now, is there a chance that some Asian countries become or are freer than the United States? Sure, that is definitely possible. Let's see. Not your average algorithm. Does the universe reward risk? They hate the universe. The universe doesn't reward anything, right? The universe is just the universe. So not all risk is rewarded. I don't know. There are lots of risks you could take. Try driving 120 miles an hour down the highway. Climb. What do you call it? Climb that face in Yellowstone, the rock there, without a rope, and you'll die. So the universe doesn't care. It doesn't reward. It just, the universe is what it is. Rational risk-taking for a human being is the only way to advance in life. You cannot move forward without taking on risk, but the risk has to be rational. The universe doesn't reward anything. The universe is not rewarding. There is no, the universe just is. All you can say about the universe is it is, and it functions based on certain laws. And if you understand, the more you succeed in the universe. But it's not like the universe is rewarding something. The language is inappropriate. Yeah, Colby.
Is this okay? Do I get more than one question?
Well, if the raising a hand is good for if you want to say something related to this question. Otherwise, I'm going to come back to the panel and do another round in a minute.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just finish. I've got 3 more questions here in the super chat, and I'll come to the panel. All right. Not your average algorithm. I don't think bullying would be the norm among school children in an objectivist world. While children don't read Kant, they absorb the nihilism of their parents and the culture at large. But what about, do you think there was bullying in the 12th century? In the neighborhood, there wasn't schools then. But sure, I mean, look, there were always bullies. Will there be bullies in an objectivist world? Yes, not as many, but there'll be some bullies. But they would be dealt with. And so their behavior would be inconsequential because the other kids in the school would stand up to them and they'd shut them down. But there are always bad people, even in an objectivist world. There would be evil people, and that means they're evil kids. So evil people are evil kids usually. So I don't think you can say there are no bullies. There'd absolutely be bullies. There are more bullies now because we live in a more irrational culture, and we let them get away with it. So it encourages the behavior. And yes, some of the nihilism seeps in from their parents and the culture. But to assume that you're going to live in that objectivist world is some utopia where there's nothing bad that happens, I think is wrong. Kids are going to experiment to try things. And they're going to be kids who are going to experiment to try things using physical force and see what they can get away with using physical force. And that's bullies. And if they don't get away with it, they'll learn, hopefully, and move on. But I think there'll always be people like that who try. All right. Arthur, this November, we will find out what America voters dislike more. Democratic socialists and neo-Nazi post-liberals. Individualism and happiness are not on the cards. I think that's right. Of course, in every district that you're in, every election, right, that's out there, you're choosing between a Democratic candidate and a Republican candidate. The Democrat might not be a socialist, and the Republican might not be a neo-Nazi. So the referendum is not on the, you know, midterm elections are not referendums on the party. They tend to be referendums on the president because people are less inclined to vote for the president's party if they don't like him. But you can't extrapolate. Now, we'll see how many Democratic Socialists get elected among the Democrats. And we'll see how many of the kind of MAGA right get elected in the Republican Party. And that'll be a referendum about those people. But I think you have to be careful to generalize. The Democratic Party is not yet socialist. The Republican Party is not yet neo-Nazi. And not everybody in that, not everybody in the political party is a socialist or a neo-Nazi. And again, when you go out and vote, you'll be voting between two people, and you'll have to make a choice between them. If one of them is a socialist and one a neo-Nazi, you might not want to vote. But if one of them's better, and one of them better in terms of not being a socialist or not being a neo-Nazi, vote for them. James, I heard an interesting argument against the death penalty. It is better to keep a few monsters alive for the rest of their lives than to accidentally kill an innocent person. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that. Ayn Rand agreed with that. She was against the death penalty for exactly this reason, the possibility of killing an innocent person. And that's why she was against the death penalty. I think with DNA evidence, there's less likelihood of that, but it still exists. And there might be situations where you still engage in the death penalty when there's just no possibility this guy didn't do it, right? The evidence is so overwhelming. But it's hard to go from, from certainty to even greater certainty, right? So I think it's better not to have a death penalty and not risk killing of innocents. All right, back to our panel. All right, we'll start with Colby. The order on my screen shifted around, changed around.
All right, I got another one for you. I was making a burger on my back porch the other day, and the smell was wafting over to my neighbor's house, right? So I was thinking about this, and what is the right revolving around like the smells and the sounds and stuff like that? Because it seems to me like there isn't a right not to be annoyed, but it's not causing damage either. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it depends, right? So if it's the smell of hamburgers, I don't think you have a right to avoid the smell of hamburgers. But if it's a smell that could literally make you sick, or a smell that is clearly disturbing, I don't know. I mean, I remember, our neighbors once, they had dogs, and they had this section where the dogs kind of lived, and they would go days and days without cleaning it. And the dogs would defecate there and everything. And it stunk. And that can make you sick. I mean, it's literally an offensive smell. You don't have a right to inflict that kind of smell on a neighbor. And the same with noise. If the noise is such that it is literally disturbing people from their ability to live their lives, keeping them awake, not making it possible for them to watch TV, can't concentrate because the noise is so loud, then you don't have a right to do that. So they would have a claim against you. So if you're doing something in your house that is physically obstructing the other person, and sound is definitely physically obstructing, the sound waves are hitting you, and they're doing something to you. And I think the smell is the same way. I can't avoid the smell, right? If it's coming into my house, if it's offensive and it's preventing me from living my life, then you have no right to inflict that on me.
don't you see like how that's not very objective? Like if I go to Vietnam or something, there's certain foods over there that I think are totally disgusting smelling, but everybody there thinks it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't make it non-objective. For you, it's disgusting, and for them, objectively. And for them, objectively, it smells fine. So the question is, in the United States, given what we cook and given the foods and given the noise that we have, what is offensive and what is not? And you've got to, you come up with some kind of standard for that. It's not hard to do, right? Objective doesn't mean true for everybody. That's not what objective means. Objective doesn't even mean true. You could be objective and wrong. Objective means corresponds to reality. The reality is you perceive it. And as you perceive it, as your neighbor perceives it, and pretty much anybody else in the neighborhood, if they replace that neighbor, would perceive those particular smells as offensive, and therefore they are banned. And they would perceive that level of noise as unable to. What the decimal is, I mean, you'd put something into the law that was reasonable. I mean, I think most cities have some kind of ordinance with regard to noise that relates to a certain level of decibels after a certain hour, for example, of the day. But, there's no, and it's true that some people might find that level too low and some people might find that level too high. But since you have to set a level, you set it at a reasonable level that affects the most people. And if somebody, yeah. So, but again, objective doesn't mean that it's true of all people at all times in all places. And in Vietnam, the laws around smell will be different than the laws around smell in the United States, and maybe in different neighborhoods in the United States. Like if you live in a farm where there's manure everywhere, then yeah, you can't be offended by manure. I mean, manure is just, I mean, you can't say, I can't work with all this manure. You move to a farm area. This is a farm area. So
yeah, so
it's going to be different.
That was another thing I realized is that if somebody gets there first, I would think they would have a higher right than somebody who got there second versus like who is the sound and the air quality of that area or something like that.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're running a nightclub and I move into a place next to a nightclub, then yes, I can't complain about the nightclub. Absolutely. But if you have a house and you like to blast your music in the house and then I move in next door to you, no, you can't blast your music anymore. So I have to be able to know in advance the nature of what you're going to be doing for me to be able to avoid that location. And if I don't know, because you just own a house, then, then I can't be expected to tolerate the noise. Right? But if it's a farm area and I move in, it's a farm area. If it's a nightclub and I move in, oh, I knew it was a nightclub. Right?
Okay.
So knowledge is contextual. Objectivity is contextual. It has to be, depends on the context. All right. Thanks, Colby. Michael.
Hi. Related to the Iran war, somebody on this call already mentioned World War III, and there's a lot of panic about a forever war. Where does that come from, and how do you strategically avoid that from happening if you were commander-in-chief?
World War III? I just don't see how it happens.
With the United States engaged in Iran.
So who's going to launch World War III? How does it get out of control? I mean, you basically tell China, stay out of it. You tell Russia, stay out of it. You have no interest here. Don't go to war with us because we don't want World War III. You basically annihilate Iran in 3 days and that's it. It's done. I mean, there's no fear here because there's no there. There's no, what's the possibility? And the only reason why it could somehow is we do what we're doing now and we project weakness and it takes months and months and months and months, and China goes, the United States looks weak. Why don't we invade Taiwan now? And maybe we can send troops to Iran and help them out because the Americans don't seem to be able to do anything. So why not take advantage of all this? But if you're quick and assertive and unequivocal, then, I mean, China doesn't want World War III, and neither does Russia. So they're going to stay out of it. Why would they enter? I don't think World War III is even conceivably on the radar if I'm running things.
I agree. I'm just curious, where does that come from in the culture? It seems like there's a broad reaction that every war becomes World War III now.
They're just afraid, and it's again a few of these people like Moshe Mayama or what's his name, Jeffrey Sachs, say this stuff, and then people go, oh my God, yes. I mean, first of all, they think Iran is powerful. So Iran, they have all these missiles, and then Saudi Arabia will get involved, and then the Houthis, and then maybe Turkey, and then, but it's still not World War III. It's still all regional kind of little powers. And then the only way you get World War III in terms of something that scares you is China or Russia. And there's just no circumstance I can think of where they intervene. I mean, other than America projecting such weakness that they feel like they should. And I think it's just fear-mongering among certain intellectuals, and then the culture being, most people in the culture just being, okay, so here's the story. Most Americans don't know where Iran is. If you showed them a map, I'd say, I'm gonna guess here, but I think I'm pretty confidently guessing, 75% of Americans couldn't point to Iran, couldn't point to Israel, maybe could identify China because it's such a big blob out there, maybe Russia. Certainly they don't know where Ukraine is. They have no concept. I'm not even sure they know what continent Ukraine is on. And I'm not talking about a small percentage. I'm talking about so when I was a kid, I was 13 or 14, and I went to school in Boston. It was considered at the time the best public school in the country, for a variety of stupid reasons. But Dukakis, who later ran for president, who was mayor of Boston at the time, his kids went to the same school I did, right? So, and most of the kids were children of Harvard and MIT professors, like real educated people. And it was 1975. The US had just ended the Vietnam War. And we had a big map on the wall, and the teacher asked the kids where Vietnam was. And not a single kid in this class knew, not a single one. And me, who had just arrived from Israel had nothing to do with Vietnam. It didn't just fight a war there. And I could point it out in a second, but they had no clue where it was. So people are ignorant. People are unbelievably ignorant. This is why I said before, Mushmai could say whatever he wants to say. His audience has no clue if he's lying or telling the truth. I mean, he says, oh, Tel Aviv's just being bombed into rubble. They don't know where Tel Aviv is, and they've never met anybody from Tel Aviv. They don't know, right? And they don't do the research.
Do you think the general public is too ignorant to be receptive to a clear message from the president of, we are entering this war for this reason, here's the intended strategic outcome? Would that help counteract this crazy messaging about World War III?
Any question, if Trump did something very un-Trumpy and actually told American people what was going on and why he was doing it, and what the threat was and what was to be achieved, then he would counteract a lot of this. Now remember, even then, only a minority of American people would even listen to what he said. But at least there'd be something on record. Here's why we're doing it. Here's where it is. I mean, I would even, Ross Perot, when he ran for president in 1994, maybe 92 and 96, right? He ran for president twice. He would sit at a desk and he'd have these flip charts. and he'd go over with people like, here's the national debt, this is what's going on, this is why we can't do it. And he got like 15% of the vote because he treated Americans like adults. Now, he was a wacko, but he treated Americans like adults. And he told them the story, and he told them what was going on, and they responded. So I think a president who actually dealt with Americans, actually had a map, brought on a map, I would bring up the map, and show them where the Middle East is, show them where the Strait of Hormuz right now is, show them why it's necessary to open it up, show them where Iran is. Yeah, I mean, imagine that. Imagine a president who actually, used this as an opportunity to educate the American people about the world. I mean, that would
be great, wouldn't it?
It would be amazing. Yeah.
Thank you, Yaron.
Sure. Daniel.
So Politico and Morning Consult did a poll between 72 and 77% of surveyed Americans cannot correctly locate Iran on a map.
I was guessing, and that was a pretty damn good guess.
Where's the market going to be in 90 days?
Well, the stock market, yes.
Yeah.
Remember, all those people are trading.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we expect them to realize that taking a stake in American companies is not good for the U.S. economy long term, and they should price it into their stocks right now, into the meme stocks that they're buying.
Yeah. Oh, well, speaking of fear, AI is hugely beneficial in my industry, which is making chips, whether it's for financial trading or for devices, AI boxes. And, to us, it's like an idiot assistant. You tell it to write some scripts and check on things every few hours, and it's tireless, right? It's an idiot, but it's tireless at doing whatever you ask it to do.
Yep.
And so huge benefit. Yet there's a tremendous amount of fear that AI is going to be destructive. How's AI impacting you personally, and where's this fear coming from?
Well, the fear is a fear that always accompanies new technology, right? It's not new. It's more because nobody understands AI, right? Even the people. So here's the thing about AI fear. The people who work at OpenAI and Anthropic are constantly telling us two things. One, they don't know what they did. They don't know how the models work. They don't know how they work. It's magic. And second, AI is going to kill us all. Now, maybe it won't. There's a chance it won't. But literally, the CEO of Anthropic is telling us AI is going to kill us all. And if it doesn't kill us all, it's definitely going to cause mass unemployment. And we should have UBI because nobody's going to have a job in, what did I hear recently? 10 years. 10 years. We're all out of a job. So the fear-mongering is coming from the people who are most educated about the technology. So it's stronger than it's not true, for example, that when the steam engine was introduced to mechanize the looms, that the textile mill owner told everybody that the textile looms were going to kill everybody or replace all jobs. I mean, and here the people who are designing the products are fear-mongering. Elon Musk, I just heard Elon Musk in 10 years, if we're still around, if AI still in existence, right? If AI hasn't killed us all, there'll be no jobs. So we're going to have to figure out how to provide. I mean, there'll be no money.
Exactly. There'll be so much abundance, no money is required.
There's going to be no money in 10 years. I was actually going to use that clip of Elon on a future show to talk about it. I mean, and that's Elon, and then you've got the guy at OpenAI, and they just signed a letter. What over 1,000 AI engineers. So the fear is coming from the industry, and spreading. Look, it's the fear that we've had forever from the beginning of time, as far as I can tell, that the world's going to end.
But back to your earlier point, they've got the textile example, right? So it's not like this is uncovered territory, and
But
yet people are
every
still afraid. So
every
it's got to
20
be a moral
years,
thing, right? It's
every
got to be a
20
moral element.
every 20 years when the new technology comes out, they've got the examples from before, and it doesn't matter. This one is bigger than the other technologies. This is huge. This might be on the scale of like agriculture, but it is true that throughout human history, we have been convinced that the world is going to end. I don't know why that. I mean, Christianity was born as a religion of Armageddon, right? Jesus was convinced the world was going to end any day now. And Paul, right, the apostle, is writing like he's going to see the end of the world in his lifetime. And it's only like 500 years later that the Christians say, maybe it ain't happening, right? Or in our lifetime, right? And even then you have millennial cults repeatedly. So there is some underlying fear that a lot of people have of reality itself that then it gets projected onto the machine.
There's also, you're on like something very mystical about that we can't predict exactly what's going to happen. And that somehow, I think that creates in some people like a real neurosis. Like they can't predict, so they fill in the void with the worst case scenario. It's like we don't know exactly what's going to happen.
You can't predict anything about the future. Yeah.
I think there is a game of regulatory capture going on. And a lot of what's coming out of the AI companies should be put on the margin of an attempt at regulatory capture and keeping future competitors out of the field.
I think there's an element of that, but I don't think that's what's driving it. I really don't. I think they've always, since the beginning of OpenAI, they've struggled with this idea of we're creating a technology that's going to kill people. I think they believe that it's going to reshape society. I think it's going to destroy jobs. And yeah, they also, as a sideshow, they also want to have regulatory capture. They also want regulations that restrict competition. But I don't think the fear is, even coming from them, is primarily driven by that. And look, it's all of them. If you look at this letter that was just written, it's people from DeepMind, and it's people from every single one of these companies. And by the way, I know academics. I think I told this story. I met this academic who's a big shot in AI and computer science and studying this stuff, and who listens to the show once in a while. So he's a Yaron Brook fan, I guess. And he told me, maybe we've got 2 years. This was a year and a half ago. So maybe we have 2 years. You know, it's finished. He says he can't think, and he has no regular. He's got nothing to capture. He's not invested. He says he can't think of a scenario, and he can't think of a mechanism by which we can prevent AI from wiping out the human race. And this is, so it's rationalism. There's a lot of rationalism out there. Smart people tend to be rationalistic, and fear is what motivates them. So, but there's an element of capture, but that's not the driving force of it, out there. So we have you remember Y2K?
Yeah.
I mean, that was a funny one.
non-event in history.
Yeah, that was, and even Alan Greenspan. Alan Greenspan, literally, the Fed had a massive printing of cash ready to go because all the ATMs would stop working and the banks would stop working, and they wanted to be able to flood the market with actual cash to be able to provide people with liquidity, because Y2K was going to basically destroy everything. People, catastrophizing is, it's not human nature, but it's a consequence of fear. It's a consequence of fear of the unknown. And people love to do it. So that's the bottom line. Now, how do I use it? I have it. One, we're going to be releasing a Yaron AI sometime in the next few months, which anybody could be able to use, ask questions of Yaron AI and answer based on how I've trained it. So that is going to be happening. I use it to outline talks. I did these courses for Peterson on Ayn Rand and on venture capital and private equity. And I basically asked Yaron AI to design a course on Ayn Rand. It did a first pass. And then I took that and I gave it to ChatGPT and said, hey, ChatGPT, what do you think about this course? And ChatGPT critiqued the one before. And then I edited and changed stuff and re-edited. And then I took it back. And I went back and forth between the AIs and between me editing and all three of us working on this. I couldn't have done those two courses in 2 weeks without AI.
Yep.
I wanted case studies, right? And I knew the case studies, but I didn't know all the details, like the dates and the dollars. And I said, write me up a 10-minute story I can tell about the founding of Atari, the venture capital investment in Atari. It's a famous story from the beginnings of venture capital, and Atari was the game company, and it did it, and it came up, and I could dramatize it a little bit and change some stuff and make it, but it does it. It knows me. It knows my voice. So it does it so it's stunning. It's going to make me, so right now I have ChatGPT doing, and I'm still working on revising this and doing at 10 a.m. All the big stories that are hitting right now, what are they? And with sources, right? With sources. And then at 12, human achievements, scan the news for any human achievements. And at 1 o'clock, I want you to look again at the news, see what the updates are, what's changed. And by the way, I give it a list of the news sources I wanted to look at. So it was giving me Reuters. So I was like, I don't want just Reuters, and I can't access Reuters because I don't have a subscription. So here's the stuff, and I want you to look at some right-wing stuff and some left-wing stuff and some middle. I want you to scan the whole universe. Now it gets lazy. So after a while, so first few days it'll scan all the things that I tell it, and then you'll see it narrow the scope down back to where it's comfortable. And you have to again tell it, no, broaden the scope of what you're looking for. And its memory kind of fades. It has this fading memory that you told me this a long time ago, so it doesn't count somehow. So I'm finding it fascinating. While I was talking to it, it's come up with metaphors that I've never made, and I don't remember any objective intellectual ever using. So it's like, really? AI is creating original metaphors? So it's stunning how good it is.
It is, but the thing is, if you just ask it to blankly write you an interesting course, it would write crap. It would not be worth anybody's time. And yet, if you ask it to start a countdown timer for 10,000 years, it's happy to do it. Yeah. It has no values. It has no skin in the game. No. And people have got to figure out that if you put the values in, AI will deliver. But if there's no values, AI isn't going to wipe out people. It isn't going to wipe out all AI. It's going to sit there and wait for you to ask it to do the next thing.
Yep. And so absolutely, it has no goals. And what I do is I tell it to write a course as Yaron. So it goes and say, okay, what does Yaron believe? Oh, I can write a course as Yaron. And it takes my values and applies it. So the first draft was not bad. It was not bad. Somebody could have delivered it, and most people wouldn't have known the difference.
Okay.
Like, there are these legitimate concerns, as you've covered before on the show, and it just strikes me of like how a mature culture and rational culture would handle those concerns in a methodical, calm way that maybe would include some sort of government involvement, in conjunction with private sector consultation and that kind of thing. But the answer is so stupid and immature by the industry, by the tech industry, to say, well, let's just hold AI back. Let's ban things.
Yeah, I mean, because part of it is, the reality is that a lot of the concerns we have are going to be almost impossible to deal with. And you know, we have to find alternatives on how to deal with it. So for example, if you want to figure out how to build a biological weapon, yeah, I mean, if you just ask the AI straight up, it's going to say, I can't teach you that. But there are always going to be ways to figure that out. And even without AI, there are ways to figure it out. AI just makes it much, much easier. And any decent, rational AI is going to put in some safeguards, and most of them do. But if you get open source AI, and I can put the AI on my computer at home, and it can run native on my home, and I can then change some of the guardrails that are placed on it, I can get anything. So there are elements of risk that are increasing because we have AI. And then the question is, how do we deal with those? And I don't know, I have a simple answer to that. I don't have a simple answer to that, but it's not slow AI down. It's probably to use AI to figure out, to catch the people who are doing this, right?
Tracking, just track them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, bioweapons take bio ingredients, right?
Yes, there are all kinds of tells, right? There are all kinds of tells. So you follow the tells. But yeah, it's going to allow people to do things they couldn't do before. And some of those things are not going to be good. Okay, you don't stop civilization because some people are doing bad stuff. You know, people are going to be able to create, I mean, they're going to be able to create, what do you call it? Simulated virtual child pornography, right? Without real children, right? Or just now, you could say that's disgusting and horrible and all of that, but okay. I mean, nobody's being abused. No force is being used on anybody. So it allowed people to do sick things. And then the question is, when does it cross over to rights violation? And how does the government get better at catching people who violate rights?
Thanks, John.
All right. Yeah, Daniel. Good question. Zach, so a question we're going to be talking about a lot in the years to come. This topic is going to keep circling back. It's the biggest news story. It's the biggest issue right now facing mankind, if you will, right? Zach.
Hey, Yaron.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Ross Perot. I work for Home Depot, and from what I recall, I think, missed out on a big opportunity to invest early on over some silly reasons, from what I recall.
Could be. I can't remember that story.
But I live in Salt Lake, and of course, it's pretty dry here, and water is a huge issue with the Salt Lake going down, and a lot of people blame, of course, the farmers and alfalfa, and there's debates over building new data centers with the water usage and whatnot. And of course, I think water should be private, but in a transition period, say the government was working towards that, how would you prioritize needs or risks, in that process when you're moving from a, state allocated water system to a private system? Because everyone has their opinion on, what the risk is. For example, a lot of people say, oh, if the Salt Lake dries up, then, there's going to be all this toxic dust. So how would a government in that process of privatization, handle those risks and allocations during that transition?
I'm not sure. I mean, you'd have to think about each industry, specifically, and what the risks are exactly and how to deal with them. And each industry is going to have completely different risks. And maybe with water, each geography will have very different risks, and you'll have to manage those. The sooner you can privatize land, including the lake itself, the better. And then there is an interest. I don't privatizing the lake. I guess there's an industry in salt, or there's some industry that benefits from the lake. They could buy it, and then they would have an interest in trying to preserve the lake, and be willing to buy water. So you have to create as many private owners as possible as you move towards private ownership of the water itself. And then the other thing is you have to have real pricing. That is, you can't have water priced, a flat price for water. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you've got to have some kind of dynamic pricing model for water. Different seasons, different quantities that you're demanding. That is, if you use a lot, maybe above a threshold, you pay a much higher price. So you've got to introduce market pricing. That is the first thing you do. Even while you're a government, you've got to introduce some kind of market-based variable pricing mechanism. And look, there's no question. Like I can tell you, the biggest users of water in California are almond farmers. It makes zero sense to grow almonds in California. It's insanity. Because California's doesn't, and if you actually price water, if they had to pay the price of water in a competitive market as compared to how much I'm willing to pay for water to drink and to have a shower, they'd be priced out of the market. And so there wouldn't be almond farmers in California. The market would just make it so they wouldn't be. So the first thing is pricing mechanism and privatization of land, and then privatization of the markets of the water supply itself. That would be the process, I think. And then if somebody bought the Salt Lake, for example, then like the dust would be their responsibility. They would be liable for any damage they caused neighboring properties, and they would have to be willing to take on that liability and therefore invest in preventing it. And therefore you'd probably sell the lake for nothing, right? Just anybody who wants to own it can own it. And again, it's probably industry that probably has the highest incentive to do it. But you'd have to think about geography by geography, case by case.
I appreciate it.
Yaron, do you have any ideas about what to do about privatizing a water table or something like that? Like people that dig wells it's a public. I mean, I don't know how you would do that.
We've privatized oil. Oil is the same thing. It's a tablet, right? It's all underground. And basically we say that if you, and I think different states have slightly different laws with regard to this, but if you drill, you can pump out all the oil that you can, but somebody in a property next to you can drill, and it might be from the same oil tablet, they can drill out as much as they can as well. So, you just bring the same kind of, people would sell the mineral rights, they would sell the water under their ground, under their property, to companies who would then aggregate the ownership of a particular water shelf and drill from one location. It doesn't make any sense to drill from multiple locations. And the same thing basically happened in the oil industry. People bought the mineral rights. So we're the only country in the world, I think the only one in the world, where private people have right to the mineral under their land. And that allows for much, that's why we develop fracking in the United States, because there's a huge profit motive to do it. So yeah, it would just be private property. Whoever owns the land on top owns the mineral underneath him, as long as they exploit that mineral. If somebody else sucks it up from the side, so be it. All right, Adam.
Yes. Like you, I have family in Israel. And I've heard several stories about what caused and happened on October 7th. You probably also heard several stories. Which is the one that you find most likely? And is there ever going to be a judicial probe to establish the facts?
So I think there will be a judicial probe to establish the facts once Netanyahu is out of the government. There will be a probe. Will it satisfy everybody? I mean, nobody's happy with probes, right? They still think the Mossad killed Kennedy. So why would it prevent the conspiracy theories from happening? What happened was an intelligence failure, but what really happened was a strategic failure on the part of the government that for 15, 16, 17 years allowed Hamas to build up and become what it became, and to grow in power and grow in confidence, and resisted the need to destroy Hamas, and perpetrated a story that came from the top, from Netanyahu, that Hamas was interested in getting rich. They were interested in economic activity, that they didn't really want a war with Israel. They had to once in a while keep up appearances that they would gauge a war, but they didn't really want. And this isn't made up, because this is what Netanyahu was saying, right? In meetings. So it was that I think that attitude from Netanyahu down that ultimately led to the intelligence failure, because there was complacency. The intelligence didn't want to send intelligence up that they thought the people at the top would turn away.
But there's also the fact that there were intelligence reports from observers, mostly women in Israeli intelligence, who were observing what was going on in Gaza, and they all said that Hamas is preparing an attack.
Yeah, this is the intelligence failure. So often what you get is people, low-ranking people, observers, and there were people who were listeners, who said Hamas is preparing an attack, and the senior commanders said, no, I mean, they're just pretending. No, this is just, if we cry wolf again, then they won't believe us when it really happens, because in the past they'd cried wolf before and an attack never happened. So that's the intelligence failure. The intelligence failure is not that there wasn't intelligence. There was intelligence. The intelligence failure was the interpreting and the willingness to accept that intelligence and send it up the flagpole, as they say. And part of the resistance of sending it up to the flagpole was the fact that people at the top were resistant to any idea that Hamas was actually wanting a war.
But everyone on the border with military experience was sent on vacation.
That's not true.
That's not true.
Not true.
Okay.
That's
Thank
a complete
you.
conspiracy theory. And not everybody on the border knew, that's like all the Jews were evacuated from the towers before 9/11. It's just not true. No, there were some soldiers, there were some military units that were sent from the Gaza border to the West Bank to deal with, the settlers and the Palestinians there, because of the priorities of the Netanyahu government, which were much more focused on helping the settlers. But they weren't sent there because they knew something was going to happen. They were sent there because that was the priority at the time of the crazy right wingers. So no, intelligence people were not sent away. And the reality is that not all the observers observed Hamas doing stuff. There were some intelligence reports that Hamas was preparing an attack, both on the physical, both from aerial photographs, from listeners, and from observers at the border. But they didn't have a date. They didn't know when it was happening, but they had the outlines of what they would do, and the senior people in intelligence didn't take it seriously. And that's why the head of intelligence resigned, right? A lot of senior people within the Israeli army have already gone and took responsibility. It's the political level that's never taken responsibility for what happened. And they're the ones, I think, who set the standards and conditions, but they never took it.
Is there any truth that some senior Israeli military people are so orthodox that they don't believe anything that comes from women, including the women who were observing the
No.
preparations?
No, I mean, my boss in military intelligence, this is a long, long time ago, granted, but my boss was an Orthodox, I mean, a full-blown Orthodox guy. And, you know, our best, my wife was our best, you know, photo, what do you call it? Aerial photograph an analyst. And he showed, I mean, they didn't treat women in other ways the same, but in terms of accepting the data, no. I mean, that's not true.
Very good. Thank you.
And even in their own world, I mean, women work in the ultra-Orthodox community. Women work, women are doctors. Men don't go, I don't trust I don't trust the information coming from a woman. I mean, there are other ways in which they discriminate against women and they don't like, and they don't like women. But I don't think it's the case that the Orthodox wouldn't accept the word of a woman in business or in medicine or in something like that, or in the military. It's not how they work. It affects them in other ways. Yeah, they won't touch a, well, maybe that's good. They won't touch a woman, and they won't, they don't want to be a woman. They say a prayer, thank God for not making a woman every day. But, it's not that it's not so much that they don't trust a woman's mind or the product of a woman's work. All right, Jennifer. And I'm no fan of the ultra-Orthodox. I hate them with every fiber of my body, so I'm not trying to defend them in any way. Jennifer.
So these AI people, you said that the people that run these companies and know a lot about it and everything, if they really think it's going to kill everybody and stuff, well, why don't they quit? Why are they doing it then?
I don't know. Why doesn't anybody ask them that question? It's a good question to ask them.
That's the first thing I thought of. Why are you doing it?
Because if they don't do it, somebody else will, and they're more responsible. They're the good guys. Everybody else are the bad guys. All these companies are organized as nonprofits in one way or the other. So OpenAI is literally run. It was created as a nonprofit, and then it couldn't grow, so it switched to a nonprofit. But it still has its governance is governed by this nonprofit entity thing, and it's incorporated as a public service corporation. So it's not a shareholder wealth maximizing corporation by law. It's supposed to take the public interest into account in all its decisions. Anthropic is also organized as some kind of public interest corporation with a trust, some kind of nonprofit trust that, I don't know, I haven't dug in too much into, but they're not ordinary companies. This is not sane stuff. These are crazy people who think that they are the only people that can be trusted in the world. And I mean, there was a point where OpenAI fired Sam Altman because they didn't trust him anymore, and then they had to rehire him, and then they changed the board of the nonprofit to be nice to Sam Altman. I mean, this is all, I did a show on that. This is all, now, Google has DeepMind where I think, nobody's saying Google's a nonprofit, and Google and Microsoft. I mean, my sense is, if I had to bet, if I was investing in the stock market, right, I would bet on Google, Microsoft, Apple to have the leading AI in 10 years and not OpenAI and Anthropic. Because I think there's just something weird about how they're structured and the kind of people they've attracted. I think it's the bigger for-profit. I also don't think there's money to be made in developing AI models because it's a super competitive industry. And I think it's going to be a commodity. The model is going to be a commodity. I think the winner of the AI race will be a company like Apple, if they don't screw up, right? And they will integrate into AI seamlessly into our devices. so that everybody will be using AI without even knowing it. And they will make the money on the device. They won't make the money on the AI. The AI will be free, and you will be using. Now there'll be AI that's charged, and there'll be specific companies that make money off of providing tools to Daniel to do the programming. But I don't know that they will have to use OpenAI or Anthropic. They'll probably use some of these companies basically subscribe to all the models, and then depending on your task, assign it to a different model based on the task. Some of these models are open source and are really, really cheap, and some of them are, and so there's a price utility function, and the models will figure out what the best combination, and you'll be able to tweak it in terms of what the speed versus price and things like that. So there's going to be a lot of innovation in the next 10 years in how to use AI, and I think that's where the money is. It's not in the
But
AI models themselves.
both Apple and Intel already incorporate an AI processor, the neural network processor, NUP, in their current chips.
Yep.
And they're already in the current generation of devices that they're selling.
Yeah, they just haven't figured out, Apple hasn't figured out yet, although I just saw it's a little bit better now. They haven't figured out how to integrate them into the device itself from a user perspective, and that's what they're working on, because that's what matters. It can be in the chip, and if I don't use it, but they're working on it. And I've just noticed, like Chrome, if you got the latest version of Chrome, at least on a Mac, has just integrated Gemini in a way that it's much more user-friendly. It's still not as good as ChatGPT, but I can imagine. So Google is trying to figure out how, God, could do a whole few hours on this, but Google is trying to figure out right now how to save search, or not to save search, but how to save its advertising model. And the way to do it right now is it's integrating Gemini into everything that you do on the browser. It's a panel on the side of the browser now and everything. So that's where it's going to be interesting. What's going to be interesting is how different companies use AI to make our user experience, and how they create tools for professionals who are going to use AI. And I'm not sure the money is made by OpenAI or Anthropic, but the people who run those companies think that they are the protectors of the world. If not for them, certainly we would all die.
Right, thank you. I have to go now. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Jennifer. Hey, Catherine. Oh, so Catherine had a second question.
No, but can I change it?
Sure.
Okay. So, on this topic of AI, so I worked for American Express, and I've worked in like corporate America a lot of my life. And what's been really interesting is that like AI is doing and is going to do a lot of the work that like all the junior analysts, myself included when I was in my 20s, spent like 80-hour work weeks doing. Like it'll do it in like a minute, and it's crazy. And it makes me feel like, oh my God, I spent so much energy and time doing all this stuff that like you just press a button now, and it like even just things like, and you have like a meeting of executives and you need someone to take notes. Like you can just record it, press a button, and it'll take like the most incredible notes you've ever seen. And it's so,
Absolutely.
I guess one of my questions is, like in the Fountainhead, when they talk about Rorik's designs versus all the other architects' designs, how Rorik's were like original and the other architects were like just copies of copies of copies of copies.
Yep.
And so there was no like real source of creativity or originality. Sometimes I wonder if AI is like shining light on the fact that a lot of the work that is done is just like copies of copies of copies. And that's like the originality is not really there in a lot of these companies, because we're starting to see with how like even just making like a board level deck or things like that, like you can just now press a button and it'll do all this stuff that like you used
Took
to
us hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. And like, I guess my point is that it's like, were we really bringing that much value? Like, or is the value in things that like what Howard Roark did, which is like create original work, which isn't that common anymore?
Well, I mean, you were bringing values because nobody else could do it, right? You
Right.
had to
No,
do the debt.
yeah, it was valuable at the time
Yeah.
because it had to be done.
And the thing is that repetitive actions like that creating a deck, that AI is going to replace. And what they
Yeah.
can't replace is the original creative spark of a Howard Rook. So I
Right.
think AI will never replace his Howard Rook, but he will replace the junior analyst. And
Yeah.
the junior analyst will have to no longer be junior. He will use AI to do the junior analyst stuff and then have time to do other stuff. And then the question is, what other stuff are we going to have them do? And that's still an open question.
Yeah,
But
and
we
I
know
guess it
from the
might
past
shine.
that there's
Yeah.
always more stuff to do.
And if people's jobs were just taking this from here and putting it there and taking this from here and putting it there and now a computer can do it and it's freeing up their time to be creative and maybe it's shining a light that these people don't actually have that much imagination or creativity.
That is absolutely right. But it also will free people up who could be creative and imaginative to be that,
Totally.
because now they'll have the time to do it and they'll be rewarded for it. There'll be a much higher reward for creativity and imagination. And anything rot will be automatized immediately.
Yeah, which is cool. I think that's good for our world then, I guess, because
Absolutely. It's super cool.
yeah. Anyway,
It's super
okay.
cool.
Thanks
Yeah.
for the
Thanks,
change of
Catherine.
question.
Yeah. Andrew.
Do you think that there's a way that Israel could have defended itself in Gaza sufficiently and kind of mitigated or obviated this narrative that it is responsible for war crimes and committing a genocide? Or was that just gonna necessarily happen by virtue of the fact that it did defend
It was
itself?
necessarily going to happen. I mean, the world is conditioned to it. It's altruism. It's altruism combined with anti-Semitism. It's just there's no way around that. It's just no matter what Israel did, it would have suffered that. I mean, it could have done better PR, but I don't think better PR would have actually saved it. Yeah, it's just altruism, and it was doomed from the beginning.
So you don't think, because I know one of your criticisms was it should have done what it did faster.
Yeah, I mean, I think fast would have minimized it because it took time for that narrative to build. It wouldn't have spared it. So the faster they done it, the better. No question about that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, Colby, on topic?
No, it's just a comment I wanted to say for I don't have any other questions.
Okay, go ahead.
I think you should really look into doing Twitch and Kick because
it's very difficult to stream there. I have to create I use Restream and everything else is automatic. And if I do stream, I've looked into it. I can't remember what step I have to take. I have to take like 3 additional steps and it's just too much work.
I'm telling you, it's worth it because those websites, not only is it really young people there, it's like every single person on that website is like degenerate. They're all idiots.
Oh, well, that's my audience. It's my perfect audience for me.
But I'm saying if there was one guy on that site that made sense, I'm telling you, it would snowball because it would
Well,
get
I can
picked
do an
up.
experiment and see what happens.
Okay.
We can try. All right. Michael.
Sorry, hopefully there's no background noise. I had to take this call on the road with me.
You're fine.
I work in manufacturing, so I'm curious if there's any proper role for defending safety rights similar to OSHA. Obviously, there's a bunch of issues with OSHA, but what would that look like? How would worker safety be prioritized in a free market?
Well, I mean, it was prioritized. If you look at safety in manufacturing, construction, all these industries before OSHA, manufacturing and construction were all getting safer steadily and systematically for decades before OSHA came into being. OSHA just continued a trend that was already starting beforehand. The incentive is the incentive of the companies. Accidents are very expensive. They're time consuming. There's often litigation involved, and they just cause a work stoppage. Second, workers are just not going to want to work in a place that's unsafe, and they're going to demand that things get safer, or they leave. So even if you don't have unions, your best people will just go somewhere else where it's safer. So you've got pressure from the bottom line, profit pressure, and you've got pressure from your workers. And I don't think any owner, any manager really wants to see harm come to his workers that's avoidable. So I think there's lots of incentives to increase safety beyond OSHA. And then you could imagine even industry groups getting together and formulating best practices and having recommended best practices for an industry. So I think all of those mechanisms would work.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there would be institutions developed to help support these things. And
Yep.
even just naturally, the world-class companies, you would not believe the amount of morale and trust and team building that you get just from making a decision that prioritizes somebody's well-being. I've
Absolutely
seen it myself. So thank you.
Yeah, it's just good business. It's just good business. And I think the best companies know that, and they get the best employees. All right, good. Let's go to our super chat. Let's see. Steven says, have you tried to get Bill Maher to be a guest on your show? No. I mean, there's no way in hell he would come on my show. Why would he? I mean, there's no benefit to him. He has nothing to gain. If anything, he should have me on his show. And we've tried that in the past, and he wouldn't do it. So I doubt that he would come on my show if he won't have me on his show. All right. The Rational says, I've studied objectivist view on animal rights, but I still struggle with it. I believe a free, rational society shouldn't tolerate pointless cruelty or sadism towards animals, even apart from animal rights. Mere ostracism doesn't seem sufficient. Well, I mean, but doesn't seem sufficient doesn't seem explanatory, particularly. Why doesn't seem sufficient, and what do you propose to do about it? So look, here's the bottom line. Being cruel to an animal does not violate an animal's rights, because animals cannot have rights. Rights come from the conceptual nature of man. A non-conceptual being has no rights. It's just the very notion of it, right? So animals cannot have rights. Now, it's true that being cruel or sadistic towards animals is immoral, because it is cruelty for the sake of cruelty. There's nothing to be gained from it. And it's cruelty towards a living being, and there's value in a living being. So it's immoral to be cruel, except under, particular circumstances you could imagine. But so it's immoral. And then the question is, how do you deal with immoral people? There are lots of things people do that are immoral that you don't criminalize, but you could ostracize. Right? Somebody cheats on his wife. That's not a crime. It's immoral, but it's not a crime. And you could imagine a society in which we ostracize somebody like that. And somebody's cruel to their animals, they're ostracized. I just don't see, if it's not criminal and it's not ostracism, what do you suggest? And it can't be criminal because it's not a violation of rights. And you can't expand the concept of rights to animals. There's just no way to do it. If you did, then there'd be no justification for eating them either. So you couldn't kill them at all. But you can't, because again, rights don't come from being alive. Rights come from being conceptual. They come from the role of the mind in human life. They don't come from pain. Pain is not the source of rights. So suffering is not the source of rights. So animals have no rights. They cannot have rights. That's just it's not debatable, right? There's no debate there, because again, the source of rights is the need of the human mind to be free of force. Animal minds do not need to be free of force, because their minds are not what, you know, they don't need to be free in order to function, because they function automatically. So animals cannot have rights given where rights come from. So they can't be protected by the criminal law. So I don't know what else other than ostracism is available. All right, Richard's coming in with $50 questions. All right, Richard, do you know how much structural mechanical engineering need to focus on appeasing regulators as opposed to real engineering objectives? How much has this contributed to the decline in construction productivity in the US? I don't know how much, but it's a big chunk. I don't know if it's 30% or 50%, but it's certainly in the ballpark of 30% would be my guess. And yeah, there's no question. I mean, regulators tried to stop Frank Lloyd Wright from building a building because they said his columns couldn't withstand the weight. And he literally had to take a column out into the open and load it up to prove to them that it was way stronger than what their regulations required. Today, you couldn't do that. You couldn't prove the regulator wrong in a simple way like that. So who knows how many structural engineering innovations are being held up, slowed down, and abandoned because of the cost is too high. So there's no question regulations generally increase costs, slow down innovation, slow down increased productivity, and make us all poorer. That's true of probably 80 to 90% of all regulations contribute to that. Richard also says, saw the Odyssey with my wife today. I think the theme that came through most, whether or not Nolan intended it to, was the decline in civilizations is the product of free will. Specifically, it occurs when men choose to disregard their reason. Interesting. I haven't heard anybody articulate that theme for the Odyssey. So that's interesting. Yeah, I'm going to see it probably this week. I'll probably do a whole show on it, because not only will I review it, but then I'll take up the different interpretations that are out there, the different reviews. I've read all kinds of reviews, from praising it to the hill to it's the ideal Christian movie to it gets Greeks pretty good. But I actually, well, anyway, I'm not going to say anything until I see the movie. So Richard, you're going to have to wait for my response until I actually see it and am able to actually know what I'm talking about. All right. Robert says, it's not all fear, not all anti-tech. To understand the AI hesitancy, consider the argument against private ownership of nuclear weapons. I agree, Alex Epstein. I agree with Alex Epstein more than I agree with Eliezer Yudkowsky, but there is an issue. I mean, I think there's, of course there's an issue. I mean, to the extent that this AI can be used to break into nuclear facilities and launch, that is a real risk. But the only way to solve that is to use AI to protect the nuclear facilities against AI breaking in. And I'm sure people have been trying to break in forever. I think the issue is way overstated. I don't think you want to really create a spectrum between Eliezer Yudkowsky, who's a complete nutcase, and Alex, who is completely sane. Reality is much, 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 much closer to Alex. Also because AI companies are responsible. They're not crazy. They're not suicidal. And if we had a half-decent or even semi-decent government, it could protect against these things. I don't think the fear is anywhere close to being rational or to being legit. I mean, at the levels that it's being expressed, and at the kind of there's nothing we can do about it kind of attitude that they have. There are problems, and there are reasonable solutions to be had around them. Richard said, I saw a study that showed regulations are responsible for over $140,000 out of U.S. median home price of slightly under 500,000. Yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense. It's over 20%. Yeah, of the cost of a house is the cost of regulation. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, imagine how much cheaper everything would be without the regulations. I mean, I know, because just doing a little renovation in California on a home that has no impact on anybody, you can have contractors sitting around on there, doing nothing for days and days and days, waiting for an inspector. And, one can just imagine what the cost of that is. Yep. All right. Let's see. All right. We've got quite a few super chats. Let's go through these quickly. Thomas, have you heard of Sarah C. M. Payne? She's a former professor at U.S. Naval War College. Great talks on war geopolitics. Perhaps a guest, future guest. I have not heard of her, no. Thanks for the recommendation. Sarah Payne, all right. Wyatt, can you believe Fauci taking the fifth? I would be surprised if he didn't take the fifth. Why would he not take the fifth? He's got nothing to gain, right? Everything to lose, and with all the conspiracy theories and everything else going around. And the fact that he did, at the very least, misinform, deceive, probably bold out lie about the possibility of a lab leak. Yeah, why? I mean, I don't know what anybody expected. And anime, were earlier objectivists wrong to consider objectivism a movement, or were they just being overly optimistic? I mean, I think they were being overly optimistic. There was somewhat of a movement, but it didn't. I think it hasn't really become a movement in terms of actually a program and something to do more than just a philosophy for living. So yeah, I think a little overly optimistic. Liam, your answer from last show to incels that being a loser is a choice would be a great title for a show. Yeah, that is a good, I like that. Being a loser is a choice. Good idea. Michael, when is Peterson Academy releasing the Ayn Rand lecture? That should massively increase your subscriptions. Michael is an overly optimistic guy. Maybe, I don't know if it'll massively increase my subscriptions, but they will be releasing it in October, I think, late October. So none of their releases have massively increased my subscribers. The one thing that increased my subscribers, I think, was when they released the first lecture of my capitalism talk to the general public, not just to the Peterson Academy students. Not your average algorithm. Why did you move around so much as a kid? My dad was a doctor in Israel in those days. For a doctor to get, to advance, they had to spend time in outside of Israel. So we spent time in London and then spent time in Boston. And my dad kept moving around after that, spending time in NIH and in Seattle and different places. And also he was, he was drafted into the army, so that was one move. And then he had a big fight with the administrator of a big government-run hospital, and he had to move. So we moved for my dad's job, basically. Zachary, I need to drop off call early. I appreciate your time. Thanks, Zach. Really appreciate you being on today. Richard, is there an Alex Epstein for housing healthcare policy yet? No, There's only one Alex Epstein, and he's for energy. There's no other Alex. There's nobody else doing what Alex Epstein does for any other profession. We need them. They're just not there. I Like Numbers says, you say we need a way to keep people with different values out of objectivist town. Perhaps some reasonable immigration restrictions would help. No, I just don't want reasonable restrictions. Reasonable, yeah. Reasonable restrictions on immigration. Say if you can work, you're invited. That's the reasonable restriction. If you can get a job, you're in. That's the reasonable restriction. No, I'm just saying it's not a good example, partially because you can't rationally have immigration restrictions. And you can't have restrictions on who will live in your town and who won't live in your town. And as a consequence, I don't want a town like that. So it's not I want the town, but I have to change my immigration position. It's that I don't want the town to begin with, partially because I don't want to compromise my views on immigration. Arthur, we are paying into a system out to destroy us. Yes, very much so. Jacob, you lied. I never said anything false. Salk trial, no saline, medium 199. Henry Ford study, Dr. Zeros, vaccine exposure, high incident chronic disease. Yeah, I'm not saying you lied. I'm saying you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. The Salk trials did have saline. There's a million sources out there that show that. You can ask that question to every single AI, including Grok, which conspires, I guess, with right-wing fanatics. And even it says that Salk used saline. The trial, directed by Francis Jr. at the University of Michigan and sponsored by the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, March of Dimes, was one of the largest clinical trials in history. It involved roughly 1.8 million children in the placebo-controlled areas, 84 test areas in 11 states. About 201,000 children received the inactive polio vaccine, basically saline, and a comparable number received the placebo. In a randomized double-blind design, additional children served as observers, non-injected controls in other areas, right? An inert substance, inert fluid, dummy shot, i.e. saline, or material prepared to look identical to the vaccine, but without antigenic activity. That was what the placebo was, right? And there are plenty of sources for that. And again, you can ask any one of the AIs. You can check them against each other. Not a single one of them reports that there was anything. Yeah. So yeah, I think you are confused. You're wrong. He says wrong. Ask Claude, medium 199. I don't know what they called it. Maybe they called it medium 199 and it was sold. I don't know what they called it. But every single source out there, every single source says there was a placebo with basically an inert substance in it. And you're just being misinformed by sources that I believe have corrupt intentions. You might not have corrupt intentions, but your sources have corrupt intentions. The doctors you're citing have corrupt intentions. And you're saying wrong. Ask Claude, medium 199. I'll ask Claude, and my guess is it'll tell me what all the other AIs have told me. So we will see. Oops, that's no good. All right, what did we want to, where were we? And with regard to everything else I said last time, again, you're wrong and you're misinformed. Everything I said last time that you're wrong on, you're wrong on. And you have a source, you have a series of sources that you're using that are basically wrong in the facts. All right, 1 second. What am I doing here? All right, where are we? Wyatt, Rand said on Tom Snyder, what will save this country is not its intellectuals, but the people. Do you agree? No, I think what's happened is the people didn't save it. And in order to turn it around, it's going to be new intellectuals. I don't think the people are going to save this country. And maybe they, to the extent she's right, the spirit of the American people allowed us to survive from when she taped that in the 1970s to today. What's that? 50 years? But I don't think that spirit is there anymore, and I don't think it'll allow us to survive the next 50 years without a dramatically group of new intellectuals. All right, here's Claude, just for fun, right? Just for fun. Yes, in part of the trial, the 1954 Salk field trial ran 2 designs side by side, and only one of them used the saline placebo. The placebo-controlled design did use saline. In 11 states, about 200,000 first through third graders got injected, or either the vaccine or a simple salt solution, saline, assigned at random, in a double-blind setup. Neither the children nor the doctors evaluating them knew who got which. Per University of Chicago statistician Paul Meyer's account, that saline injection was the whole point, because the control kids received a real shot of something inert. All right. The observed control design used no placebo at all. In 33 other states, only second graders were vaccinated, and first and third graders were simply watched as untreated controls. No injection, no saline, no blinding. So accurate answer is the trial as a whole was not a clean saline placebo study. Roughly 750,000 were in a rigorous saline placebo arm. Over 1 million more were in the weaker observed control arm. The 72 to 80% effectiveness figure that mattered came out of the saline placebo portion, precisely because that arm was the one you could trust. This is Claude Opus 4.8. I did what you said, Jacob. Didn't give me the same result. Sorry. And I mean, there are dozens of accounts out there of these things, of Salk's life, of the tests, of you don't have to believe the conspiracies that that a few people are writing books about and that are driving this. They have an incentive to convince you. But so anyway, that is what Claude Opus 4.8, to be exact, said. So, 1 second, let me just check this. All right, just MP something. I heard you say that the only way to deal with a bully is through brute force. In the context of kids at school, couldn't the interpretation of that be dangerous, especially for young people? Sure, I mean, bullies are dangerous. Adults should intervene as quickly as possible. But the reality is that the only way to stop a bully is to confront him and to challenge him. And maybe you don't do it alone. Maybe you get a couple of kids or 3 kids to do it together. But you got to confront him. And parents and administrators of schools can help, but they won't stop the bully unless the kids, they can, I guess. They can move him out of school. They can kick him out of school, but they don't. So the only way to deal with it is with other kids. Now, in a more rational school, a bully would be kicked out of school. But you can't do that in a public school where you're supposed to admit everybody. So they'd be kicked out of school. There's no place in school for somebody who's violent. All right, Wesley. companies like Anthropic have recently been buying large numbers of books and taking out the pages to scan and train the AI models. This is being done discreetly without contacting the author's thoughts. Okay, so there are two stories out there. We got to get clear on which one. There's a story that came out just a couple of days ago, 3 days ago maybe, that Anthropic is buying old books, pre-1905 books, and many of them rare editions, rare copies, and they're destroying the book to scan it all in. There's no copyright issue because the copyright is expired. And the reason they stopped in 1905 or 1920, I can't remember the article, is because they don't want to violate copyrights. And there, the complaint is they're destroying old books. Old books are beautiful things, and they're destroying them because they're literally ripping the pages out and scanning them. So that's one story. And if you buy a book, you should be able to do whatever the hell you want with it, including burn it. So the fact that they're scanning it is not a bad thing, and ultimately is good for all of us. The second part of that is there are lawsuits out there saying that Anthropic and OpenAI have been buying copyrighted books and scanning them and accessing the New York Times website and without, in a sense, paying a royalty. And that's in the courts. And I think Anthropic and OpenAI settled that and paid out a huge amount that ultimately part of that money went to authors of the books that they scanned. So the courts are dealing with that issue. So where rights are being violated, the courts are dealing with it, and they're trying also to figure out when is a right violated. Is a right violated when you scan a book to train the model, but it's not going to use it? It's complicated. So the courts are trying to figure this out. I don't think it's a slam dunk case in terms of what the right approach needs to be. But I think they need to pay something. It's just a question of what they pay. And they are paying. My point is they are paying. The courts are forcing them to do that. Mary Benz, did you see the graphs I emailed? Helpful. No, I somehow missed that. Could you email it again? Sorry about that. Michael, why haven't the communist dictators of China imposed a welfare state? Because they're not communist. And they believe that, they believe something that I think, Marx said maybe. You gotta work to eat. They are nowhere near as egalitarian. They're not egalitarians at all. So they want to encourage people to be successful because that's how society, in quotation marks, builds wealth. The answer to that is they're not communists. And they'll only establish a welfare state if they think they need to do that to appease the people so they don't rebel against them. And so far, they haven't felt the need to do that. All right, Michael, do you find people more friendly in red states than blue states? I don't know. I mean, people in New York are not friendly, but that's New York. It's part of being in New York. People in California are very friendly, and it's a blue state. People in Texas are very friendly, and it's a red state. I don't know. My guess is the South is friendlier than the North, and that has more to do with weather and the kind of people who settle in the South. Southern Europe is friendlier than Northern Europe. So I don't know that it has much to do with red-blue. And it depends who you are, right? If you're black, are they going to be friendlier to you in blue states or red states? If you're Hispanic, if you're a foreigner, if you speak with an accent. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I think you have to go town by town or state by state. I don't think it cuts blue-red that way. All right, that's the Super Chat. Thanks to all the Super Chatters. You guys have been great today. You guys in the panel, does anybody have like a question you really want to ask? We've gone about 2.5 hours, but anybody who has a question really want to ask? Catherine, you're muted.
I got a question for you.
Yeah, Colby.
When you guys finish building that place in Austin, that museum or thing you're doing,
It
are you
opens
gonna?
September 2nd, 2028.
Yeah. Are you guys gonna move the ARI office to Austin, or are you gonna
Yes.
stay in California?
Yeah, it's going to be in that building.
Oh, cool.
All right. Catherine, did you have a question?
Oh, I was gonna say, well, what was your favorite places of all the places you've traveled?
God, it really depends on why I'm traveling, right? So for scenery, New Zealand. New Zealand just blows everything out of the water. It's just gorgeous, beautiful. For culture, you know, it's hard. Florence, Paris, London, Rome. So that's culture. For food, San Sebastian in Spain, Barcelona in Spain, Spain generally. Yeah, so it depends why you're going, what you're going for. There's a lot in the world to see. Go see it, is my
Yeah.
view. Lots of different reasons to travel, lots of different things to see. Barcelona or Edinburgh? Oh, definitely Barcelona. I mean, I'd visit Edinburgh for 2 days, Ian, but it's so glum, it's so gray, it's so wet. It's beautiful when the sun is shining, like 2 days a year. It is a gorgeous city, but it doesn't happen very often. All right, guys, thank you. Yeah. But I will see you. Oh, Nikos tomorrow, same time, 8 p.m. Tomorrow with Nikos. See you then. Bye, everybody.